Hello and welcome to the 94th episode of Growing Up Geek, the weekly podcast for geek entertainment and nostalgia. My name is Brad and I'm joined by my brother Rob.
There's a map for that.
I know, you said it.
Did you watch... Okay, I know you were watching the Hell's Kitchen season finale.
I was, yeah.
Happy the guy won who did. Dave, I believe, because he broke his arm and was awesome still. But
I know, I constantly shout, "The risotto!" in the kitchen now.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely. Great guy. But during that whole thing, Verizon was apparently a sponsor, and they had this commercial, right? And they're like, if you need to look up friends who are nearby, there's a map for that. If you need to, and then the guy, like, he's using his phone, right, apparently, but he's playing Rock Band on his phone somehow while using it.
I feel like people have probably seen this ad because
Yes.
I have seen it for a little while, but I feel like they're coming at it from a good angle, touting their coverage, but a bad angle. I think you pretty much said it best in your post. Like, they're essentially showing that they don't have an iPhone.
Yeah. Like, you really, it's a good idea. It's like, okay, what are our strong points? Let's remind people why they should be on Verizon, and that is, we have the largest, huge network in the country, right?
With the suckiest phones.
Exactly. And they're like, well, how are we going to remind them? I know. We'll parody the really popular commercial about our worst flaw.
I also think this about all of the... apparently Subway, by the way, is the Antichrist, and they're pillaging everything. I don't know, because all other companies are afraid of them. I don't know. Have you noticed that? Like, Pizza Hut, like every possible food vendor, their commercial shows that they are better than Subway.
Yeah,
Have you noticed that? Like, they actually cast actors as Subway employees. There's like a million of these. The Subway employees are looking depressed. It's the straight-up N64 thing.
Right. Gosh, these ad agencies, it's just whoever's doing them is running thin. I feel like it's those kids that were, like, we used to make skits with in youth group.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, you have to come up with an idea for something, so let's do it. Okay, rather than anything original, let's just parody something that's already established and out there. And just because that's all I can think of working in advertising.
But I just when you parody something or when you do that, it just shows that you are essentially scared of the competition. It actually reminds people that the competition is still there.
Exactly, which is why I'm like, no, don't do that. And not to mention, their coverage really isn't that great because. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
I thought it was. I thought it was just really awesome coverage.
No.
With really bad phones, but maybe it kind of equals out. I mean, God, their ad makes it look like piddly 3G coverage versus like rocking.
I don't know because my girlfriend has Verizon, and she has like. Anytime she's gone to visit her brother out in California, she literally asked if she could take my phone with her. Because where she is, Verizon doesn't work, but apparently Sprint does. Apparently everybody else does, but Verizon doesn't.
Well, I think that you're going to have that. You know what I mean? Like, even with the strongest carrier, whoever that is, ?
Yeah.
And your mileage may vary, of course.
Well, here's what I think. I actually think Verizon owns a lot of their own towers, whereas a lot of the smaller companies they'll piggyback off of Verizon or they'll piggyback off of other people. And I think Verizon doesn't piggyback, so if somebody has coverage somewhere else, they're not gonna pay them money because they're Verizon. They're like, we'll build our own tower eventually.
All right,
so that's that.
Interesting. I wanted to take the opportunity to apologize to our listeners for last week's ending. People may have noticed that you abruptly stopped.
Right. I should really apologize for not charging having my computer plugged in.
Yeah, so here's basically what they missed was a discussion of how David Copperfield did his flying trick, which, spoilers, was with wires. But more detailed discussion, and you'll never hear that, so I figure, hey. And then you talked about seeing his stuff in person.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff was awesome to watch on TV and to imagine was actually happening, but when we saw it live and saw that everybody, not just David Copperfield, but the people he called up on stage and stuff, were all acting the same way, especially the lady who looks in his pants for the thing that disappeared. And he's like,
right. That's
thank
really
you.
that's the moment where we like find Santa's beard in our parents' drawer.
Right.
Is like when she reached inside his pants, we were like, oh no.
Well, I guess she's an actor, and everybody's an actor, and it's all a conspiracy, and nobody on TV actually is witnessing any of this,
Yeah, and then he shot ghosts at us, and they hit the ceiling like behind us.
Right.
And we saw them like grabbed up by like a carny's like hand. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly apologize for that. But hey, I heard you went to a VGX.
XPO, whatever VGXPO Expo.
Isn't it VGX Expo?
I think it's VG Expo.
Okay.
Or the Video Games Expo, but they always abbreviate VGXPO. And I don't know if it's so I'm not quite sure how that works. It's the American Games Journalism Developer Conference, like,
Right, sure.
But
you went to it.
I went to it.
One day of it, anyway.
Yeah, I went to the Sunday, the last day there, because that was when they had their breaking in panels, which are basically discussions about breaking into the video games industry.
Yeah.
Which is what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I would quickly like to say that this is the way to do it. Like, get near your target field. Just get near it. Like, right now you're like, oh, shoot, I have a friend who is, just quick story, sorry.
That's okay.
Who decided to work in an accounting fashion at a movie studio. And as a result, he met M. Night Shyamalan because he was the one who handed him his check.
Yeah.
And many other people who worked on like M. Night's movies. And M. Night was saying, hey, we're going out to dinner, and invited him along. And at the dinner, he made like contacts in the industry. Really cool. So like, even working in the accounting department, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Just get close to the field of choice,
That is absolutely the advice that I got from the guy I talked with there, whose name was Wayne Strange.
That's amazing. I hope that you work for this man.
I know. Well, he's the composer for Island Officials, who are an East Coast group. And I'm making this sound like this was this awesome expo, but this was really the highlight, and then from then it just goes downhill. But this guy was cool, and he said, I was like, well, how did you get in? He's like, basically I attended, expos like this one, met people, like he met Tommy Tallarico and stuff like that, which I missed the day that Tommy Tallarico spoke there, so that, that was sad.
Oh, that stinks, yeah.
But, let me just say some of the highlights from this expo. The first thing I went to was a panel called Getting There, and about how casual games is really the place to start. And a lot of people kind of just want to get in and do Gears of War.
Right,
and that happens sometimes with like Full Sail graduates or something like that, but for the most part, this lady who was talking said, start with indie games. Start with simple to make, one-person, two-person development projects, but just that show that you can make a game and go from beginning to end, and then use that to build a portfolio. And that was cool. And that's at that thing I started trading cards with people. Like I had my card, they had their cards. Lots of nerd sweat drenching each thing.
Beards, ponytails.
Like the girl who was talking was like modestly attractive, but so that made the geeks like, no, can I approach her? And like
beautiful.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. But the best was the guy following her, which was the Game Design Foundations was the name of the panel.
Okay.
It was this guy, it sounded like it was going to be so cool. Like he's going to be talking about innovations in video games, and just I was thinking like, oh, he's going to be discussing like parallelisms in player thing reactions, or just what we've been kind of listening to on the Idle Thumbs podcast, which plugging that, it's pretty cool. But anyways, he turned out to just be this guy. Like he didn't even seem like the guy who was supposed to speak, but his friend and the other guy's like wife was having a baby, and he's like, just read the notes and you'll be good. I'm not saying he actually was that, but that's what he seemed like, because he was just reading the PowerPoint. Like, all right, so here's World of Warcraft. Hollywood is jealous of World of Warcraft because 11.5 million people play it, and they pay $50 a month to play it.
Well, everyone in video games who's not Blizzard is jealous of World of Warcraft.
Right.
Like,
But
That's
here's
not
the
even
thing.
just a Hollywood thing.
Who are you talking to? You're at a video game conference. Everybody knows what World of Warcraft is, and everybody was
Yeah.
like, "It's $15 a month, not 50."
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, and then I got up and left the moment he was like, "These are the Nintendo, the handhelds. Those are pretty good, and you can
What?
use a thing on there called Pico Chat to talk to one another." And I was like, "Picto Chat?"
Yeah,
It's
he
like,
definitely is like the friend.
I'm like, he's talking to parents and moms or something. So I left.
Mhm.
I went to explore the show floor. It was pathetic. Like Nintendo was there. That was
Yeah.
cool. But they were just basically like, here's, shake this Wiimote and it'll play a game.
Yeah, so this is not PAX Boston.
No, not at all.
Which I've just marked on the calendar, by the way. March 20-something.
Yeah.
Excited.
And the last and best quote from this show was from the Rated M panel, which was about discussions in the funny stories from the industry apparently, but this turned out to instead to be a discussion about video game ratings. And the one guy sitting there, kind of like hat, sunglasses, like total douchebag looking guy sitting there talking
Okay.
into a microphone, and he's just like, I mean, we've all had dreams about killing people, right? I mean, that that's not illegal,
Oh,
and that's what a
no.
video game. If I murder somebody, even if it's
Yeah.
a child, I mean, it's not a real crime. I was just
Wow.
like,
If he's thought that hard about it, I mean, sir, you may not want to reveal this. It reminds me of the conversation I had with a guy when iPods came out, and I was like, well, I was getting big into like not pirating music, sort of spreading that around. And
Right.
one guy told me, well, I listen to songs and I store those songs in my head. I mean, that's not illegal, right? Like I can think of a song whenever I want. It's like, yeah, you can do that. That's not what pirating is.
right.
Thank you.
I mean, nor am I gonna walk around like I have the best iPod ever up here.
Yeah,
It's
and
never
I can
the
change
same
the
song
lyrics
twice.
whenever I want.
Exactly.
And a song becomes remixed instantly.
That can be the answer to every kind of thing. Like, I'm playing the world's best video game right now in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh. Well, that sounds like a relatively fruitful expo for you in terms of contacts. I know you said that you are actually doing a little.
Yeah,
work on
well,
the side.
I wanted to say, like, the big thing that happened at the end was they were doing, like, showing off people's portfolios.
Yeah.
And it was such a small group that we actually were able to, like, use the conference hall to show our stuff. And so I literally got up in front of a room of people and played, like, a piece of music from my Palm Pre. Like, I just held it up to a microphone.
Dude.
I was like,
yes.
here's this. I think it's good for a platformer. And like, people were like, that's good. And, like, I had a guy come up to me, and he was like, like, I have this game I'm working on for XNA.
Yeah.
Could you write like a minute thing just for the Sizzler reel so that I can show it off?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure, So I actually
So
got some
cool.
work out of it.
That is so cool. I think you need to continue going to this expo. If it's as lame as this, and you can
Right.
jump on stage and take over,
Exactly.
that's awesome.
Go
That's
to
really
the
awesome.
lamest expos you can.
Yeah.
That's the lesson from that. And there's one next week called Games X. Like,
Yeah.
all of this is really lame, but I'm like, I might go to that one too. It seems like a bigger deal.
Attend anything with an X.
Exactly. Anything where the X, that they think it's still cool to have X for Expo.
Awesome. Well, that whole Expo Mart thing reminds me of Expo Mart computer shows whenever we were younger.
Yes.
Do you remember the commercials that would come on TV that would be like, VGA, CD-ROM?
The computer show and sale at the Expo Mart in Monroeville.
They would flash a bunch of buzzwords on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CD-ROM.
That totally. I went to one of those once, and I walked in. This lady there was like, so are you going to buy anything? And it's like, well, we're just looking around. She's like, that's an awful lot of money to pay to just look around.
That's an awful lot of money to pay to not pay any more money on things.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going around, and there's just boxes of for people who've never been to these kind of things. Monroeville Expo Mart, like boxes of keyboards and mice. And I remember specifically, 11th Hour, the sequel to Seventh Guest, I think.
Yeah.
Was just there, but it like wasn't out yet, so it was like some sort of pirated, like homemade photoshopped box.
Yeah.
It's weird stuff like that.
It's really amazing what some of these people get away with at these expos. Like, you are publicly here with a booth, and it's
Right.
like pirated like stuff. They had that there too. Like, a person had their own booth. They're like, it's an open source console. Basically,
Uh-huh.
everybody's putting just piracy on it.
Yeah, well, I actually bought a demo disc from this guy, Shucky Soft. If anyone's out there and they know about this, I Googled it and found one result. Shucky Soft, he had like an orange cased CD of full of like 50 like amazing demos from companies that would probably never put their demos together.
Yeah.
I remember it had like Descent on it.
Yeah.
It had like some sort of hovercraft game. It had like Dark Forces, things like that, but like all mashed together. So I was just playing all these things. I think it had Brutal Battle.
Yeah. It was is digitized people like Mortal Kombat, but none of them had martial arts abilities, so they were all just kind of like fist out.
It was pretty hilarious, but there was that expo, and then there was one that Mom and Dad took us to, and I remember Dad when we were leaving commenting, like we could tell when we were walking through that this was pretty bad. Like everyone's trying to put on a good face, and at one point when we left, like we were all keeping quiet, and when we left, Dad said, "I think that's what hell is like," and like the family exploded with laughter, like because we were all like, yeah, we were totally feeling that way. Like let's never go back to like gray rooms, endless gray rooms, you know?
Yeah.
Weird merchandise. Anyway,
this one, there was probably the most egregious thing was a like buy shirts for like retro games, and literally you could almost like peel it off, like the little paper that they stuck to these shirts were like, oh yeah, it's like, you know, the game box artwork for this game I remember, and it's $20, and it's a shirt, and it has a piece of paper glued to it. And but there was like Virtual Boy was there, like they had Sega CD, like all this stuff, and it was like $20 if I wanted to get like an old Sega Master Drive.
I saw a PlayStation at the thrift store the other day for like $10 with controller at the Goodwill. At the Goodwill, which is a place that as soon as you walk into, you're like, I shouldn't breathe in here. You know, but they have it like shrink wrapped with the like handwriting on top that said like includes power cable. And I was thinking, well, what about the video cable? I don't know.
No.
PlayStations are at the Goodwill now, so that's
what it is.
But I wanted to talk about the dangers of the cloud.
Oh.
I read some articles this week that kind of cast a little doubt on the cloud. For those who listen to the show, they know I'm a proponent of the cloud. I'm excited. I want it to get here, and I want to ride the cloud. But there was a couple. The one article was in eWeek, and it was about. It said, cloud dangers. Beware. And it was a story about a bank that accidentally emailed sensitive documents to like 500 Gmail accounts.
Yikes!
And the bank's response was, "Well, we got to shut down those Gmail accounts."
What?
Yeah, logical, right? Well, then the judge that they went to, because Google won't actually do that without a court order. So they went to a judge and sure enough got a court order to order Google to shut down these people's Gmail accounts. Never did the judge consider that they might have already read the sensitive information and copied it. And in fact, Gmail has an offline mode.
Right.
So this first story really wasn't that scary to me because it's basically doofus at the bank / judge who is unfamiliar with technology.
Yeah.
But the second one actually was a lot more close to home because I used to own a Sidekick, and I don't know if you heard this. Did you hear about T-Mobile's data loss?
I heard
this week?
Rumblings on a Twittosphere, but nothing concrete.
Yeah, this article is actually titled "We Probably Lost All Your Sidekick Data," and it's pretty spooky. This week they had Sidekick owners were told that, and this is a quote. You never want to see this quote from a company. That we have almost certainly lost your data as a result of server failure at Microsoft / Danger, which is the company that makes the Sidekick.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's it. They say they're still looking for a way to recover it, but they're not really giving people a lot of hope. And in fact, you cannot buy a Sidekick right now. They're listed as out of stock. They actually recommend that people do not turn off their Sidekick because when they turn it back on, it won't sync with the cloud and they'll lose their data. Freaky.
Wow.
Very freaky. And that's basically the whole problem with the cloud is that it's stored on other people's servers. Those servers have to be secure and backed up and maintained. Otherwise, we're trusting it to one storage place, basically kind of like, your own home computer or something. I'm very surprised at this. I used to own a Sidekick, and way before there was an iPhone or any discussion of the cloud or anything like that, My favorite feature about it was that when you took pictures, they were instantly available on the T-Mobile website. Like if you did anything on your Sidekick, if you even put a note in, you could go to a web interface of your Sidekick online, and you could see everything you did. Your whole dashboard interface was available. I love that, and I always thought that was so cool, and it actually got me thinking about things like what's available now, and it took years to actually get there. But
that, I guess, is a kind of a good example of like, all right, maybe we shouldn't trust the cloud. Maybe it has a few leaks in it.
Well, I think the issue is the company. Like who are you trusting with your data?
Right.
When we are ready to jump feet first into the cloud, it needs to be the best. Like it needs to be the company with the most security and the most backups. Like I want to actually see data on how many backups there are for these things in case things go down.
Right. Now, does this have anything to do with like Danger and Microsoft, like that Project Pink that I mentioned a few episodes back? Actually, that's being designed by Danger. So
I don't know. This all took place Monday. It was basically they say server failure at Microsoft/Danger.
That's crazy. Like how do so many servers fail, and then how is there no hard drive backup?
I know that's the weird thing. Like even the company I work at, like we back up a lot.
Right.
I don't know how Microsoft or Danger would lose their data. Very spooky. Anyway, that is an actual cloud problem.
You know what I think is the solution to this? We actually, rather than storing our data in a cloud, we need to store our data in Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII, because he has a big sword.
That sounds really horrible.
That's secure.
There will be at least one company using him as their mascot, and it will be in Korea.
Absolutely.
So we wanted to move on now to our movie review this week, our main course, if you will, which is going to be about a horror film. It is almost Halloween, and so we watched a horror film by Michael Dougherty, which is called Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat.
For those who don't know, Michael Dougherty is the co-writer of X2 and Superman Returns. This movie was actually produced by Bryan Singer, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sure probably for a lot of people, this movie just came out of nowhere. It was scheduled for an October 2007 release, presumably in theaters, but it was delayed all the way until just this past week when it was released direct to DVD. And holy crap, if you're a director, that's a long time to wait for your stuff to come out. So anyway, it is an anthology movie, kind of like Creep Show or Cat's Eye, those kind of old 80s anthologies where there's like 4 separate stories. They all take place on Halloween night, although unlike Cat's Eye, all 4 stories are intertwined. There are characters from different ones that will appear in the other. Sometimes we sort of travel backwards or forward in time to see more of a particular story. And so that is it. So I will ask you your thoughts on Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat, kind of like Toys R Us.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I liked this movie.
Okay.
I think it's a worthwhile rental for Halloween.
Yeah.
So by the time you hear this episode, get it. I agree entirely with like what this movie is trying to do, and it definitely is an example of a movie being aware of what genre it is.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a horror compilation Halloween movie.
Right.
And I think what's cool about it is that, first of all, it kind of does like the Tales from the Crypt thing where it's like pretends to be from a comic book.
Yeah. Great intro, by the way. Great comic book panel intro.
And the sort of Fallout 3, like, these are the things not to do on Halloween,
Yeah.
I thought like that set it up perfectly, because how do you have 4 separate stories but still, not make it feel like you're sitting through 4 different movies?
Mm-hmm.
And what they do was, first of all, there's a common thread through each one, which is myths about Halloween.
Well, yeah, and there's, similar to the Cat in Cat's Eye, there's this pumpkin-headed kid. Actually, he's got kind of a burlap sack over his head. He's on the front of the DVD, and he sort of is the cat of this movie, if you will. He moves in between the stories.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to talk about that. But getting back to what I was saying about like the themes, like how each story kind of has to do with, all right, never go out alone.
Yeah.
Never go into a stranger's house.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Razors and candy and things like that. Like all these myths about Halloween. So there is like an overall villain in this thing, which is Halloween itself.
That's clever. I actually didn't even pick that up, but now that you say that, yeah, I think it is smartly crafted.
Well, definitely. And the other thing was you pointed out like the kid in this sackcloth mask who just appears in every story,
right,
the same way the cat did in Cat's Eye. And I thought it was also cool, hopefully not spoiling much, but how like same way as in Cat's Eye, the final story kind of revolves around that character. So you can finally like associate their presence with more than just being an impartial observer, but an actual active element in the story.
It was a nice reveal. Like some of the things about him, you're kind of curious about him, and you do get to learn more about him at the end, and I thought it was very satisfying.
Yeah.
I would describe this movie kind of the way you describe real Halloween candy. Sometimes you're going to get a Snickers bar, and sometimes you're going to get a circus peanut. Of the 4 stories, I liked 2 of them a lot. Specifically, the ending one that it had Brian Cox in it with a false nose. I don't understand that.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, did you notice? Like, his nose is like longer than it should be.
Maybe because they're trying to make him look older than he should.
Yeah, he is kind of beat up looking. Love me some Brian Cox, and that's basically the last story. And then also the one about the kids on the school bus.
Oh yeah,
I just like the way it sort of is like a it champions the geek, kind of in a way. It sort of deals with bullies and that kind of thing. I really especially liked the one kid on the bus with the Dracula mask. I just felt so bad for him, and I thought that's an iconic character. Like just the sort of oversized mask that doesn't have a jaw on it. Liked that. So the other 2 stories, they're sort of more of like the gratuitous sex and gore type of stories.
Right.
Which is mostly why I avoid horror, is a lot of it tends to tread in that, water instead of the true suspense and all that stuff. This is not an extremely scary movie, but it is a fun movie, I think. Your mileage may vary, but the good news is that if you don't like the one, it's over quickly. So,
I think I agree with you a little bit about stuff. More or less, I found myself really like, if I didn't like a story, I kind of forgot that I didn't like it the second it started to intertwine with another story.
Yeah, and some things that begin very cliche end very uncliche.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. But, you have to suffer a little bit through the part that seems like, okay, we're just seeing literally this cliche thing. And then it's like, oh, there is a twist. You can feel a certain cleverness underneath the film, which I did appreciate. And, again, this guy has co-written some pretty great films. So I think some of that shows through.
There's a lot to say about, I think, how classic this horror movie feels. I mean, you mentioned like this type of genre hasn't even been looked at maybe since the 80s, but even a lot of these themes or this feeling about that horror movies have.
Yeah.
One thing I was talking about it even at lunch today was kind of the morality in this movie.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. It has a bit of an 80s feel.
The idea that, okay, anybody who dies, anybody who bites it,
right,
kind of deserves it, like in a weird way, because the monsters or the villains
enact justice.
Exactly, they act kind of as this moral compass.
I always thought that stuff was kind of funny, but yeah, I mean, there's a good way to do it. I do also think it's funny whenever a character in a movie is like shouting at his girlfriend, or his son or whatever, and he's getting so overworked, you're like, you're gonna die in 2 seconds. Pumpkinhead has no tolerance for loud people.
Right, exactly. Cujo doesn't like that you're chewing meat so loudly.
Exactly. And I think that can be bad sometimes when it's like, what? You need to read your Bible? And then suddenly, the monster bursts through the wall. It's like, nah, come on, don't let him do that.
But in a way, you kind of then root for the monster. You're just like, oh, thank goodness, like he bit it. And so you have people that you don't want to die and people you do want to die. And it's kind of cheesy, but in a way, it's moral. Like there's this guy in this one that you kind of despise at the beginning, and then he gets his, and you're just like, oh, thank goodness, know.
That is cool.
And on top of that, I mean, I think it handles the supernatural very elegantly. They go from something that is, pretty plausible to gradually like, okay, that seemed supernatural, but was it? It gently turns into a monster movie, which I thought was kind of cool.
Well, I really expected you to kind of be bummed by this because I sort of pushed it on you, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. It sounds like you maybe even got more out of it than I did, which is really cool. I would go ahead and say rent it like you did because there's at least half of of the stuff in here that you're going to probably, if you're like me, you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, it is a horror movie. There is gore, there's nudity.
Did you jump at all, by the way, just real quick?
I think maybe
a light hop.
I actually I think what this movie also did really well was misdirecting your, this is going to be the scary thing, because it kind of, rather than having the distraction thing and then the other thing, which turns out to be the monster, it has the distraction, the thing that should turn out to be the monster, like in your geek mind, and then a third place, which you really don't see coming at all, but it's just like, whoa,
right.
Okay. This whole time, the cinematography hasn't in any way, I really feel like this was made by horror movie fans.
Yeah, you can tell. In a way, some of that stuff, like I said, it is a little cliche, but I think he puts sufficient twists in there. So that is Trick or Treat, and with that, we'll basically bring our show to an end. I sort of got nostalgic earlier in the episode, so I won't put a nostalgia here at the end, but I would like to say if you want to email us, you may do so. Our email address is mail@growing-up-geek.com, and as always, you can follow Rob on Twitter at twitter.com/GUGRob.
And as of this week, you can also follow Brad at GUGBrad.
Thank you, co-host.
Yes, indeed, other host.
Thank you, Parasite.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's it for this week. Thank you for listening once again. My name is Brad.
I'm going to go dream about killing someone.
And we'll catch you next week.